Welcome to the unknown zone, where buried history is brought into the light. Today, we uncover one of the darkest and least known chapters of World War II, the secrets of Unit 731. In the remote region of Manchuria, far from the public eye, Imperial Japan built a facility unlike anything the world had ever seen. Officially was called the Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department of the Kuomintang Army. But behind that harmless name hid something far more terrifying. Unit 731 became the center of Japan's biological warfare program and experimental complex, where thousands of innocent people were subjected to cruel and unimaginable tests in the name of science, power, and war. The story begins in 1932, when Japan seized the region of Manchuria. It was here that a brilliant but ruthless military doctor, Shiro Ishii, convinced Japan's leaders that modern warfare required new weapons, ones capable of destroying nations without firing a bullet. He believed biological weapons were the key to Japan's future dominance, and so, with military approval, he built a secret base to test them. The victims were not enemy soldiers. They were civilians, men, women, and children taken from villages, prisons, and streets. Many were Chinese, but others were Korean, Russian, and even some Allied prisoners. Once inside Unit 731, they were stripped of identity and given a chilling label, logs. Because to Ishii and his staff, they were not human beings. They were experimental material. The experiments were brutal and carried out without anesthesia. Some victims were exposed to deadly diseases like plague, cholera, and anthrax, only to be dissected alive so researchers could study the infection's progression. Others were placed in freezing conditions for hours to test the limits of the human body in extreme cold. Bones were broken to study healing. Limbs were amputated and reattached in different positions. People were tied to stakes and bombed with grenades to measure blast effects. Every test was designed to push suffering to its limits, not for treatment, but to refine Japan's future biological weapons. Outside the laboratory, Unit 731 expanded its reach. Ishii and his staff tested disease outbreaks on entire villages, releasing infected fleas into communities and watching epidemics unfold. Thousands died in these field experiments, unaware of what had been unleashed upon them. Inside the facility, researchers documented everything with cold precision. Charts, photographs, daily logs of infection, pain, and death. To them, this was progress. To the victims, it was a horror beyond imagination. By the early 1940s, Unit 731 had grown into a massive complex with multiple testing centers, crematoriums, and laboratories. It operated under extreme secrecy. Few in Japan knew it existed, and those who did remained silent. Ishii believed he was preparing a weapon that could change the war's outcome. He envisioned deploying plague-filled bombs over enemy cities, turning living populations into mass casualties within days. But as World War II began to turn against Japan, the staff of Unit 731 faced a new fear: discovery. If the Allies captured the facility, the world would see the horrors they had created. And so, in 1945, as Japan approached defeat, orders were given to destroy everything. Buildings were burned, prisoners were executed, evidence was buried or blown apart. Ishii demanded absolute silence. Unit 731 had to disappear. But even after the war ended, the truth remained hidden. Many expected the leaders of this horrific program to face trial, and yet, astonishingly, they did not. Instead of punishment, Shiro Ishii and several of his top researchers were granted immunity by American investigators. In exchange, the researchers handed over their data information gathered through the suffering and death of thousands. The United States believed these findings offered valuable insights into biological warfare and wanted them before the Soviet Union could obtain them. This controversial decision meant that Ishii lived freely until his death, never facing justice for the atrocities he oversaw. Other Unit 731 members went on to hold respected positions in medicine, academia, and government, their past quietly buried. For decades, the existence of Unit 731 was denied or ignored. Survivors were silenced. China demanded accountability, but Japan largely avoided responsibility. Only in the late 20th century, As former personnel and survivors began speaking out, did the world truly understand the scale of what happened? Today, the memory of Unit 731 stands as one of history's darkest warnings. It reminds us of the depths human beings can fall to when science loses its morality, when war erases compassion, and when power becomes more important than life. The victims of Unit 731 were never given the justice they deserved, but their stories continue to echo across time, urging us to remember what unchecked cruelty can create and why such darkness must never be allowed to rise again. Thank you for watching this journey into a hidden chapter of World War II. For more untold history and deep investigations, stay connected with the Unknown Zone.